it's not very long after the 1954 Brown versus Board of Education ruling that racial segregation in public education was not unconstitutional, and the schools across America began to process desegregation, practice desegregation. Your courageous students, known as the Little Rock Nine, that you knew some of them were the first in Arkansas, but it was in 1959 that you were recruited by a member of the second group of pioneering black, to be a member of the second group of pioneering black students to integrate Central High School. How did that come about? Was it your idea? Was it, whose decision was it? What did y'all talk about around the dinner table that night when he said, honey, I want you to be the sacrificial lamb and start going to Central High School? Were you scared?
Well, that was not the way it unfolded. My father and my mother were involved in conversations over the years from the 40s and 50s, and they were engaged in thinking about what the community needed to do. So I was already talking with my parents about whether or not my brother and I would go to Central when the Little Rock Nine began.
You wanted to?
Yes, yes. First of all, I lived at 7th and Park, so that literally my brother and I always thought that was our neighborhood school, since it was at 14th and Park. So that we really saw that as an opportunity to go to a school in our neighborhood, but also to go to a school at that point that was ranked in the top 40 schools in the nation.
You were already thinking, your parents had already ingrained that how important education was to you. Did you watch the Little Rock Nine? Did you stay out of school that day and go down there and watch the Little Rock Nine go into Central?
I would never have gone down there with a mob. I watched the things on TV and read lots of things in the newspaper, and followed it very closely over the years, so that we were not recruited, those of us who went. We were a part of people in the community who were asked, would anybody volunteer? And lots of young people volunteered because you had to be screened. There was intellectual testing, there was psychological testing, and
really?
And the school board kept winnowing away the number of students that they would consider sending to the school. Little Rock used the pupil placement law in order to select. Between 1957 and 1971, the students who went to Central and Hall, who were African American, were placed there by the Little Rock School Board.
For 20 years? And it had to do with your grades?
It had to do with grades. It had to do with the perceived strength. You know, the psychological testing was designed to choose young people who would have the strength and presence of mind to be in a stressing and distressing situation.
How many people applied when you were applying?
Oh my goodness, I think there may have been 20 or 30 or more young people who were in the queue.
Describe a psychological testing.
Well, we took the Rorschach, and we worked with the school psychologist to, you know, look at pictures, look at images, and then talk about what we thought we saw. That's what the Rorschach is, in order to get some sense of whether or not we were, I think that, frankly, they were looking for students who were talented, but also who were nice Negroes. They wanted people who were very calm, very gracious. You know, they were looking for model, you know, people talk about model Asians, but I think they were really looking for model students among the group.
So your brother applied also?
Yes.
And how long did it take before you found out? When did you start applying? Like in July, and then you knew by August?
Oh, no, not in July. That went on for maybe even a year. I mean, you know, the queue started when they began recruiting for the Little Rock Nine. Then they, you know, kept building the queue of students who would go for the other grades.
Because the Little Rock Nine was 1957, and there was no integration into Central in 58. So that must have been when they were queuing you up, like you were saying, and testing. And then in 59, you started. So it made
But what happened in 59 that's fascinating is that initially, when the school opened, only Carlotta Walls and Jefferson Thomas of the Little Rock Nine were admitted. The school board was trying to keep the group keep the group of the Little Rock Nine attending and not adding anymore. And so the NAACP Legal Defense Fund got involved and went back to court. And so Frank Henderson and Sandra Johnson were admitted in the 11th grade, and I was admitted in the 10th grade, and we came into the school after school started.
So out of the Little Rock Nine, there were only 2 that went back in 58?
In 59. Yeah, when the schools reopened.
In 57, out of the 50, in 57, the 9 and 57, there were only 2 that went back in 58.
Yes.
Sorry, I said that backwards. Oh, I bet that was, I just cannot imagine being a teenager and going to school in such a hostile environment. I could hardly go to high school in a nice environment.
Well, but you have to remember, Kerry, that we grew up in the segregated South. And there were many things about life outside of thinking about desegregating a high school that were not pleasant. You had to go to the back of the bus. You had to remember that you could only go to a colored restroom. You had to remember that you couldn't drink at a water fountain. You had to remember that you could never go to the lunch counter in Walgreens. So there were an awful lot of things about the way you lived in the segregated South as a Negro child that imposed upon you and certainly sent you negative messages.
So you were tough.
Yeah, I would say that children, not me, but just children of parents living in the segregated South were taught from the time that we could stand up what to do so that you could be safe.
Oh, I see.
And so that's how we could have been prepared to go to Central when we didn't know there would be the school desegregation. Is that all of the things that our parents taught us and the things that we learned at church and Girl Scouts about how do you live safely in an environment that has all these barriers and restrictions, but also how do you live with hope and joy in expectation that the future is going to be a future in which the promises that your foremothers and forefathers in slavery never realized as democratic citizens, that you might be able to be the first generation to realize that. And we were.
Tell us about the first day. You got up that morning.
Yeah, I got up that morning. Daddy stayed home from work and we prayed. And then Reverend Henderson came because he drove us to school, Frank Henderson's father. And so Sandra, Frank, and I were all together. They picked me up because I lived closest to the school, and we went. And on the steps there were National Guardsmen, because it was not clear what was going to happen when people learned that 3 more Negro students were going to enter.
Was there only going to be 3 of you that year?
No, there were 3 more. Kalata and Jeff had already entered.
Yeah, so there was just 3 more coming that year. Okay.
And we walked up the steps very quietly, and I walked into the school, and everybody was in class, so it was very quiet. And we met with Miss Huckabee, and we met, the principal greeted us and told us that Mrs. Huckabee would be our key contact, and she talked with us to let us know where our office was, that she was available in case we had any distress or needs, and she took us each to our homerooms, and I went to my homeroom, and
what'd they do when you walked in?
People just looked at me.
Nobody did anything?
Mm-mm. Nope. My homeroom teacher showed me where my seat was. And so that what I learned that first day was that that we were going to be shunned. And so over the 3 years, nobody in my homeroom ever spoke to me. In the 3 years, my homeroom teacher spoke to me to let me know, or the class president spoke to me to let me know it was my turn to read the Bible. And so nothing could be more fascinating than to be in a setting where I would be a part of reading the Bible, and we would say the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, and I was being told very directly that I didn't matter, and so people didn't look at me, people didn't talk to me.
It's hard to even talk about, isn't it?
Yes, yes. So what I think people can't begin to understand is that what you saw was what happened to the Little Rock Nine, and that was a very active, it was in the news, people were doing all kinds of things to harass the Little Rock Nine. That's why the troops came. That's why they had escorts in the hallway. We didn't need that. The five of us didn't need that because the resistance turned to shunning.
Oh. So no spitting in the face?
Oh, I did have that. Oh, I did. I had the absolutely incredible experience of, if you've ever been in Central, the staircases take you all the way up. I was going up to the top floor, and there was this kid. Every day when I went past this classroom door, he would lean out and glare at me. And finally, one day when he leaned out, he had been collecting saliva in his mouth the entire period. And so that he spat in my face. And I want to tell you that when I went to see Master Harold and the boys, when we lived in Madison, Wisconsin, there was a spitting incident. And I had never thought of how that impacted me. I burst into tears in the theater. The people around me were quite startled. And I realized that I had such an emotional response because it's such a humiliating and degrading thing to have someone spit on you.
And you can't do anything about it?
No.
You've passed the test that you would not do anything about it?
Well, and actually, that wasn't the most horrifying thing, Kerry. The most horrifying thing was that, and when a football player kicked me on my knee that was bandaged one day, to be in a place where not one person will come to your aid. That's the most jarring thing that one can learn, is that you are truly alone in a situation and that other people don't sense your humanity. And so that kind of disgusting thing, dangerous thing, I was at the top of a staircase and had to go down 5 flights of steps, that nobody would reach out if I stumbled or fell. I mean, that was the thing that I learned in that setting, is that whatever the students had learned at their mother's breast, it wasn't about hating me. I've never felt that I was hated. I felt that people had been taught that I didn't matter, which is different.
Kind of like you're not human.
That's right. You're not the same.
You're not the same.
You're not the same.
You don't have the same feelings
That's
I
right.
have.
That's right. That's right. You're not the same.
Did you cry at night when you went home?
No, not at all. My parents were absolutely clear. They said, this is not something that you need to cry about. This is something that you need to gear down and understand that you have no idea what's going to happen. You have made a decision. We have made a decision as a family to support you, and that you have no idea what's going to happen. But as things happen, you have to bear up. And that was very good, because when I went, we talked before I went about what my goals were. And my goal was to have an excellent educational experience that would then catapult me to a fantastic higher ed experience and a fantastic life.
And it did.
And it did.
You got scholarships.
Yeah, I did.
Did you ever ask to quit? Did you ever say, Mom and Dad, can I just quit?
Absolutely not. Not a day. There was never a day in which I felt that quitting was what I wanted to do.
So you walked home every day?
Never. I never walked any place again. It was dangerous.
That's what
I was taken to school every day. I was picked up. I never learned to drive because my parents would not.
You don't drive right now?
I did learn. I didn't learn to drive until I was 30. I didn't learn to drive until I was 30 because my parents would not. They were not interested in me driving because so many people would see me around the town, kids, and so they didn't ever want me to be out alone. So I never did anything alone. I never went on the bus again alone. Everything that I did, I was always with my parents or my brother, because that was the danger, that being clearly identifiable from the school setting, somebody might just do something.
You're like a star.
No, it wasn't like a star. You're like a, no, it's not that. There's nothing glorious about it. What you are is that you're like a marked person. You're like a target. You're like, it was very negative, to have to not have the kind of freedom as a teenager to kind of hang out.
Yeah, right. You didn't get to hang out. You missed all the youthfulness of being.
Well, no, but my parents would take me. I went to dances. I was in Girl Scouts. I was in Y Teens. I did things at church. I had a very vibrant life outside, but it wasn't the kind of thing of walking along the streets with my friends that I did prior to.
Where did you go to dances?
Horace Mann. I hung with my friends. I mean, in fact, most people that I know from Horace Mann don't even remember that I didn't go to Horace Mann.
Because you were there all the time.
I was there. I went to basketball games.
I was wondering, how was your social life? So that was completely your education life, and then there was a completely different social life.
Because by law, we could not attend any activities at Central, and we could not participate in any student organizations.
Oh.
By law.
So it wasn't quite desegregated.
It was desegregated. It wasn't integrated.
Oh, there you go. Your brother went there.
Yep, 1960.
Did he have to? Was he also a marked child? Did you feel like it?
No, he had more independence, and he was out more. He learned to drive.
What year was he in there?
63. So I went in 62. He's 1 year younger than me.
So he went in the next year, and things were already getting better for him.
Well, no, that's not true, because on the 50th anniversary of his graduation, one of his classmates wrote a letter to him, and she wrote about his presenting a paper, and she said it was probably the best paper that anybody in the class wrote, but at the end, nobody responded, and that all of her life she'd been haunted by the silence that he experienced, and she knew that it was larger than just that one class.
Haunted by the silence. That's wonderful. I bet that made him feel wonderful, and I know it made her feel better to confess.
She said no, that it didn't make her feel better. She said because what she recognized is that it was too late.
Oh.
And she said that it was, but that she had learned a very important lesson, and that was never be afraid to stand up, even if you're just one.
Boy, I think a lot of people need to learn that lesson. There's a lot of bullies out there today, and it's hard to stand up to bullies.
If you liked this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel by clicking on the picture of Kerry's face in the center of the screen. To watch the full-length interview, click the video in the top right. For more interview highlights, click the video in the bottom right. Thank you for watching.